Hey guys, we are back, and today we're talking about UI. Hey folks, KL Smith here, joined by Edgar Diaz, Matt Shimberry, and today we're going to be talking about UI. If you're new to the Community Corner, this is where we take all of the community input. We try to, as best we can, answer questions from the community and talk about upcoming changes. And like we said, today is UI, and Matt, you got the floor today. We have some big changes coming in V44, big overhaul.
Yep.
You kind of just tell everybody about what is coming in V44.
Yeah, so essentially the HUD has been completely redone. And the HUD, of course, is the in-game UI, the ability buttons and health and all that kind of stuff. And we've completely overhauled it. It has a new art style. We've moved things around. We've added a ton of new features that have been heavily requested from the community and from ourselves internally as well, to be honest.
That's right.
Big changes coming.
Okay. Now, the big goals for the HUD changes, what kind of things were you guys talking about initially to kind of spawn all of this big overhaul?
So a big focus for us was making sure that players had the right information that they needed at the different points that they need them, right? So there's kind of different phases of when you're playing Paragon, right? Sometimes you're kind of in lane and kind of peacefully, last hitting, right? Sometimes you're in a massive, 5-man team fight.
Right.
Sometimes you're, hunting to some of the different things like Prime and stuff like that, needing to know different timer information. So, we looked at everything that we have, and, we've been having lots of different UX tests where we bring people in and we kind of look at how they play the game and experienced players, new players, kind of the full spectrum of players. And we, play the game a ton ourselves. We have our own internal play tests. And we look at all this over the past year and a half and said, what is it that we need to improve, right? And so, I think one of the biggest things was we have a lot of invisible mechanics in the game right now.
Right.
Sure.
Things like when you silence someone or stun someone, or things like that, you don't necessarily know what's going on. Or maybe when you have a card like Apex Predator as an example, you really have no idea how many stacks you've earned, if the buffs are actually working, things like that.
Right.
And so that was a big focus, was making sure that we had proper buff information, debuff information, status information. If someone else stuns someone, making it just much more obvious that that person is stunned.
Gotcha.
Clarity, exactly. So it's all about making sure that moment-to-moment gameplay, you have the critical information that you need to make the right decisions, right? Are your abilities on cooldown, things like that.
And just to be clear, so cards like Sleeper Agent, for example. Sleeper Agent is a card that applies a silence.
Yes.
You're now going to be able to actually visibly see that this person is silenced.
Yeah,
correct?
right. And I mean, you could technically see several of these before in the world's tiniest icon and progress bar, right?
But it's more bringing
much
them,
more obvious.
Sure.
Yeah. And so, as an example, when you stun someone or silence or whatever, we were actually going to print in big, large text the word silence over the hero. And that way, everyone who's involved in the fight, they can see, silence. Now go attack the person. Or quick, bring the person out of danger, whatever it is. Just really getting that information that they need right there.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, there's also some long requested items that are coming into this just from the HUD overhaul. What are those big features?
I think the most obvious one is team frames, right? And so team
Big
frames
one.
are on the top of the screen. You can see all of the players on your team and on the enemy team. We show a little bit different information for allies versus enemies, but on your side, you can see the health and mana of everyone on your team. You can see ultimate status, so if they have their ultimate available or not.
Huge.
Right?
I can't tell you how many people have been like, hey, does Muriel have her ult right now? Should I go in?
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So much of that for so long.
Yeah,
That's
and
awesome.
I mean, these are things that we've wanted to fix for a long time too, but we knew that the foundation of what we had before for the HUD was the wrong thing to build upon, right? And so that's why it took this kind of overhaul to get there. And kind of something I think that's really important too to stress is that what we're about to put out is the first pass of this new overhaul, right? Like we're not done. I mean, it's good. We're very happy with it, but there's a lot more to do with it, right?
Okay.
We got a lot more features that we want to be adding, and I think some of it was really even touched on at the end. This is the first pass. So I very much didn't want to like brand this as like, oh, HUD 2.0. Look at all this. It's done, right?
Yeah.
No, this is the first pass of the new HUD that will set us up for all the other improvements we want to do over time.
Okay.
Gotcha.
Now, is there some character specific UI
Sure.
taken into
Yeah.
effect?
So actually, that's a great example of something that we want to be building on for a very long time,
Right.
right? And what we mean by character-specific UI is lots of different characters have unique mechanics in their kits that are, again, invisible to a lot of players, right? And we want to be able to have the UI support these mechanics. So, let's say, for example, we've got this, just I'll make up a hero like Double Shoot or something like that, right? And he's got some mechanic that maybe every, 10, 15 shots when he's shooting, at some point maybe he gets empowered or something like that, right?
Okay.
Maybe you want to keep track of how far you are on that, right? So an obvious
important.
choice, maybe he's got guns or whatever it is, right? You might put some bullets there to kind of keep track of how many shots he has.
Right.
And then oh, I'm getting close to my next state, whatever that might be. I don't
Gotcha.
know what that would be. It's just an example.
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
So it's more things that play specifically to the hero that you are playing. There.
Exactly,
So
right. And
information that is relevant to me playing this hero.
Yeah, that are unique to each hero. So like another example would be Moragesh. Like, why not just have a permanent element for who your current mark is, right? Like, that would be useful.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or Sevarog, how far along am I on my stack progress?
Gotcha.
Right? Things like that are one-off for each hero. And then we can even like flavor for each hero too. You can imagine, actually someone asked this question on Reddit, like, would you make that progress bar, for example, for Sevarog, like look all sinister? Like, yeah, of course.
Sure,
Yeah,
sure.
let's really sell the flavor of the character as
That's
well.
cool.
with it.
Yeah, that's really awesome. So another question that we saw pop up, I saw it on Reddit, I saw it on the forums, is health bars. 'Cause
Yeah.
we
Yeah.
showed it
Huge
in
topic.
the
Yep.
UI blog. Health and mana bars are at the top center.
Correct.
What was the kind of reasoning behind that?
Yeah, so that's actually been a really big topic internally as well. Moving health bars is dangerous, right? Like everyone has their muscle memory, and I'd say of all the information you need to know in a fight, how much health do I have or specifically, am I about to die, is probably the top of the list,
Right.
And so what we found from our own internal UX tests, again, with using eye tracking and stuff like that, is we saw that the bottom health bar was just not successful. Players were not looking at that. New players or experienced players from other MOBAs, like they just plain were not looking at it. It was invisible for whatever reason, right?
Sure.
And we had played around in the past internally with moving it top and bottom, and there was promise that the top was actually where players were looking more.
Okay.
And with Paragon in particular, we were taking lots of different cues from existing MOBAs, but also from shooter UIs, because in many ways the game is a shooter, right? In terms of your camera and positioning
Right.
and navigation, things like that.
They
right?
share similar elements.
They share
definitely,
similar
for sure.
elements in terms of how you
Interact with the world.
Interact with the world. Exactly what I was looking for. And so what we were hoping to do was kind of take some lessons from that. And so we wanted to try putting the health on top, right?
Okay.
And when you look at a typical kind of eye tracking map of where players spend a lot of their eye time in Paragon, it does tend to lean upwards, right? And so because a lot of what you're aiming at is a little bit higher, if you're looking at characters' faces, they're going to be on the top part of your screen, things like that, right? And so the hope was that by putting it on the top, they would be more noticeable. And we actually had this dream that the overhead health bar would be able to be off by default because we'd solve the problem of health, right?
Right.
And the truth is we didn't really solve it, right? The top health bar turns out it's probably, we don't have as much data on this one, but it's probably not any better or worse than where it was in the bottom, to be perfectly honest.
Gotcha.
But the good news is we have the overhead health bar, right? And that's really what everyone was leaning on before, and it's still there. You can lean on it today, right? And the other half of what happened was when we moved the health bar up top, we then, of course, moved something else where the health bar used to be, and that's the abilities.
Right.
And we found actually a lot of success moving your abilities down there in terms of cooldown awareness, the other alerts that we've added, like, hey, time to upgrade or time
Gotcha.
to spend gold. We have, if you can't use an ability, there's an alert that kind of tells you why you can't use the ability, not enough mana or whatever it might be. That kind of information got a lot better with the rearrangement that we did. So ultimately, it turns out that the trade-off, I think, is a good trade-off, right? The bottom health bar, which wasn't doing a whole lot for us, not being great on the top is kind of a wash, to be perfectly honest.
Right.
And then the other kind of real bottom line for all of this is that no matter what, we are embracing options, and we intend to add more options of like where
Where
your
you
health
can-
bar could be,
right.
right? And so while for V44, the only option for the top health bar is to turn it on or off, we absolutely intend to add options where you can put it back in different places. We already have a mock-up for what it would look like in the bottom left, kind of tucked in with your XP and things like that, which is similar to how a lot of other games kind of have the unit status frame, your own player status frame in the bottom left. So we're already playing with stuff like this. I don't have an exact promise of when it comes out, but it's already on our radar. We already have mock-ups. We're already talking about this. But it's been a huge topic internally. I hope that players who really don't want to have the overhead health bar, I hope that they can get accustomed to the top one, at least until we get to the point where we have all the possible health options you could ever want.
Right.
Gotcha.
So we have some questions from the community, and we will do our best to answer all of them. This one is from Dream in Obsidian. Will we finally be able to move cards around without unequipping them?
This is something that's been a topic for quite a while.
It has been.
So Matt, talk to us a bit about this one.
All right, so the answer is yes. And there's actually quite a bit of card shop improvements that we did, in particular for the PC audience.
Okay.
And so we've added drag and drop in the card shop. So it's just a lot more natural. You just kind of flick the card up. It's a lot faster. You can swap everyone can swap cards now. You can swap cards. We typically say horizontally versus vertically. So vertically, of course, is equipping and unequipping, and then horizontally is across the slots.
Right.
So you can change slots for any card, and that includes like a cursed card, right? You can change it from slot 1 to slot 2 because you're not unequipping, you're not breaking the rules of the game.
Sure. Right.
In fact, you can change slots while you're out in the field as well.
Gotcha.
Again, you're not changing the rules of the game, you're just changing which button it's bound to, essentially.
Sure. So cards like Growth Totem, maybe that kind of stack up.
Exactly.
You're not losing any benefit.
They do not become
from
unequipped by simply changing the slots. That's in there. And so we also got in hotkeys for quick purchasing attributes, right? So now while you're in the field, you press Control 1, 2, or 3 for agility, vitality, or intellect. So that I use that now immediately. I don't bother using the old way at all. Just Control 1, 1, 1, 1, 1.
Right.
Hopefully I'm not like floating that much gold. But in fact, with the new alert, I actually almost never float gold, which makes me just feel so much better as a player to not look down and be like, what have I done with the 5,000 gold sitting here?
And I think it even adds to some of the immersion, right? Like you no longer having to stop and press that key and take you out of the action for that second to kind of to invest those points. Kind of just having that's kind of nice.
Yeah, exactly.
That's cool. This one is from Little Z.
Little Z.
Can you comment on some of the customizable aspects of the HUD, which we touched on just a second ago? For example, would we ourselves be able to change the placement of health bars? This is exactly what we answered. Or do we have controls for the size of the elements of the HUD?
So in 44, you're going to get a glimpse of the future we want to go in with lots and lots and lots of options. I think we've got 12 new options that allow you to turn on and off a couple different elements, like the top health bar. The overhead health bar, you can now move from overhead to over shoulder, and you can separately do it for ranged and melee characters. Whoa. In particular, actually, melee characters default to over shoulder, because melee characters being in the center of the screen, their health bar is actually right on top of your reticle.
So let me tell you, with Richter, whenever I have it over top, like I can't.
Okay.
So now you can adjust that over to the shoulder, or just turn it off altogether.
Wow.
If that's what your preference is. We've got options for minion health bars. Right now, I believe again everything is changeable, but I think the default is that enemies show only when they're damaged. The little health bar, and then allies are actually off by default. But you can turn them on always, turn them on only when it's damaged, or turn them off altogether separately for allies and enemies. You can do the same with the overhead health bars in general for heroes. There's just a ton of new options. But again, there's about 12 for now. And I think we've identified so far 50 that we want to work towards. And that 50. These are going to trickle in over time, over the next many patches. But it's essentially, I mean, at the very least, every individual element on the HUD gets at least an on and off. And so that just kind of adds up right there. Plus lots of different positions and behavior options, color options, things like that. Like it really can add up very quickly.
And ultimately, this kind of allows players to kind of get the information that they want. So for some of these players who are more aimed towards like a minimalist, let's say, a HUD, they kind of just don't really need all of the nooks and crannies and all of the details everywhere right there for them to look at on the screen. you eventually may have the option to kind of lean towards that, as opposed to the guy who wants all of the information, everything thrown right there in front of him.
Yeah, we have a really broad audience, and instead of kind of taking the Apple approach of like, oh, you're gonna have this
Using
HUD
this
and you're gonna
thing.
like it, right?
Right.
I just want to embrace lots of options for every different kind of player.
Got it.
Awesome.
Got it.
Oh, and the last bit there about scaling, it's not in V44, but we do intend to add a general UI scale as well, so you can go big, small, etc.
Awesome.
Again, that helps with the audience, right? Some players play on a television, some players play on a 30-inch monitor 6 inches from their face, right?
Sure.
Having that scale option is super useful.
That just made me so happy. I had to go upstairs in my living room and like plop back.
Yeah,
That's right.
It's gonna be awesome. So last question here is from Poetic Jump Shot.
I like that name. I like
I
that
do.
name.
That's a
great
I
name,
like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
What's Fangtooth? I went on and answered this on Reddit, was where I initially saw it. But Fangtooth is the new buff that is replacing the 3 raptors. And I actually let folks to know that it is a giant raptor currently. I don't know if that'll change. Yeah, but anything's possible.
Could be anything.
That's right.
Yeah, so be on the lookout.
Fear
in
the Fangtooth. Fear the Fangtooth.
And the release notes coming out on Monday.
That's right.
So you guys can get some more details on it. But that is what Fangtooth is.
That's right.
Fangtooth. I love that name.
Yeah.
That's right. That's right.
So, Ed.
Yes,
tell me
sir.
About, before we sign off, your stories of the Shadow Contest.
Yes, so we have some community stuff going on, actually. So back when we pushed the Shadow's Eve patch live, we actually announced a creative contest as well. We've been seeing some awesome stories come out of it. So the Stories of the Shadows contest is what we ended up naming it. We have some great stories that were submitted, some awesome fan art. So be on the lookout. We're actually going to be announcing the winner on the 31st. So Halloween, we'll be pushing that out.
There you go.
And there is some really cool stuff for us to share with you guys. So please be on the lookout for that. Just in general, lots of really exciting things right around the corner. Starting with 44, we've already talked about some of the things last week on Community Corner. We had
Heroes?
Yes, we had Cameron
Yeah.
Winston on here along with myself and Mooney. We talked about Heroes, some of the reworks coming. We got the jungle stuff. Kale already alluded to some of the Fangtooth stuff. I know a couple folks were asking about what is that exactly, because they got a hint of it right there in the UI. We have the new HUD stuff that Matt was able to jump on here and talk to us about that, and some system changes, some major system changes. So a lot of changes coming in 44. Very excited to get in front of people.
It's going to be a fun time.
Oh, yeah.
Now, one thing I want to mention real quick before we sign off is I promised on Wednesday that I was going to read some Shadows Eve stories. Like, it was going to be like spooky story community night. I
Nice.
know it'll be the first, but it'll be like in lieu of the winners. I wanted to read a couple of the stories out on stream. So
All right.
hold me to it. I read, was it like 3 weeks ago? I read that one.
Yeah, you did. That's right.
It was pretty fun. So
It
I'm
was.
I'm
It
looking
was.
forward to that. Well, guys, thank you guys for coming on the show. Hopefully, you guys like this kind of new format, a little bit short, sweet, concise, to the point. Still trying to have a good time over here, but we're definitely looking forward to feedback from you guys on V44 when it drops. We have the release notes coming out Monday. It's going to be a big one, guys.
Oh, yeah.
And we'll see you guys next time.